Thanks for joining me for another class. I'm calling this class Memorizing the Bible. Of course, we're not going to memorize it word for word, but we are going to memorize it book by book. I'm trying to give you some memory techniques that I have used over the years to help me remember what the books of the Bible are all about and try to give a highlight of the entire Bible. In the Old Testament, we have 4 divisions. We have law, history, poetry, and then prophecy. And we're going to be looking at books of the law to start out with. We looked at Genesis last week. And if you wanted to describe it in just one word, I would use the word beginning. It's about the beginning of everything. It's about the beginning of creation, the beginning of sin, the beginning of redemption. It just gives us the beginning of things. And then I also use the concept of 4 by 4 because there are 4 main events and there are 4 main characters. There's the 4 main events: the creation, the fall, the flood, and the covenant made with Abraham. And the 4 main people are Adam, Noah, Abraham, and Joseph. And today I want to look at Exodus. Exodus. How do we describe Exodus? Exodus means to leave, to go somewhere. And I use the word exit to describe Exodus. If I had to describe it in one word, it's just about exiting Egypt. Now, you see, it takes up several hundred years after Genesis. The Israelites have moved to Egypt. Remember the great famine, and Joseph has gotten there, and he saved the family and the world, and he's invited his family to move to Egypt. And it says there came along a Pharaoh who didn't know Joseph. A couple of hundred years possibly has passed by now, and here's a Pharaoh who doesn't know who Joseph was. He doesn't understand why all these Jewish people are here, and they're having kids. They're growing. And so they're beginning to be afraid of the Jews, and so they enslave them, and they forbid for the Jews to have any male children. And, this is how we're introduced to Moses. His mother has delivered him, and they're afraid that they're going to have that baby killed, and so they hide him in the Nile. And once you know it, Pharaoh's daughter comes and finds baby Moses, and Moses' sister's there and watching it all, and she says to Pharaoh's daughter, I can find a Hebrew lady that will come and nurse this baby for you and help you out with him. And so she goes, gets her mother, and so Moses' mother raises him, and he is raised in the palace of Pharaoh. Now then, as you look at Exodus, you can describe it in just 2 different concepts. The first half of the book is narrative. The last half of the book is law. So if you're trying to memorize this, it's narrative and law. The first part begins with Moses. And Moses' life is divided in 40s. The first 40 years of his life he spends in Pharaoh's palace. The second 40 years he spends in the wilderness. And the last 40 years he spends in doing God's work, calling the children of Israel out of Egypt. And so that's the story of Exodus. And we see here that he is called to go and help the people. He's been in the wilderness, and there's the burning bush, and God calls him in the burning bush. Now I'll come over here to Exodus, the 3rd chapter. Moses had tried to bring relief to the Israelites and had killed an Egyptian taskmaster. So he ran for his life. There's the first 40 years. Ran for his life, went into the wilderness the second 40 years. He's 80 years old, and God calls him. In chapter 3, verse 7, it must have been exciting to hear this. The Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and I have given heed to their cry because of their taskmasters, for I am aware of their sufferings. So I have come down to deliver them from the power of the Egyptians and to bring them up from the land to a good and spacious land, to land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanite and the Hittite and the Amorite and the Perizzite and the Hivite and the Jebusite. And now behold, the cry of the sons of Israel has come to me. Furthermore, I have seen the oppression with which the Egyptians are opposing them. Can you imagine the thrill Moses must have felt to hear God saying, I've heard their cry, I see what's going on, and I'm going to come and personally deliver them from the Egyptians. He must have been thrilled. But then verse 10 comes along, and he says, therefore come now, and I will send you to Pharaoh, so that you may bring my people, the sons of Israel, out of Egypt. I'm going to send you. Wait a minute, I thought you were going to do this. Yes, God works through his people. He's going to work through Moses. So he sends Moses. Of course, Moses puts up all these different excuses why he can't go. And he ends up saying, well, God says, well, I'll send Aaron as your mouthpiece for you. And so God speaks to Moses. Moses speaks through Aaron. Then Aaron speaks to the people. And he has a one-point sermon. Let my people go. And Pharaoh has one answer. No. And so what we see are these plagues that God sends upon Egypt. Each one demonstrates how God is more powerful than the gods of the Egyptians. And the last plague is going to be the death of their firstborn. And this happens beginning in chapter 12. And we have something very important introduced to us. We have the concept of the Passover. God is going to pass over the houses that have the blood of the Lamb on the doorpost, and he's going to spare those people. But if you don't have the blood of the Lamb, then you're going to be slain, and the firstborn will be taken from you. And so that's what happens here in chapter 12, the Passover and the death of the firstborn. And of course, all the Egyptians who don't recognize God do not follow this right, and so they are their firstborn are all killed by the death angel who passes over their homes, and they're very upset, of course, by this, and so the Jews have exited Egypt, and they let them go at first, and then their anger started to swell up. They said, "Wait a minute, what are we doing here? Let's go back and get them," and they chased them out into the wilderness, down out to the Red Sea. And at the Red Sea, God is there directing them to the Red Sea, but he's directed them to a point where they're stuck. The largest army in the world is behind them, and the Red Sea is in front of them, and doom is certainly going to hit them. But then God does a miraculous thing, and we know the story, I hope, that God parts the Red Sea, and the Israelites passed through the Red Sea on dry land, but then when the Egyptians followed them, they only get partway through the sea, and God allows it to collapse on them, and this army is destroyed. And so quite a great miracle. In chapters 12 through 14, what we see is kind of the gospel in preview. The gospel where we are redeemed by the blood of the Lamb, the Passover Lamb. And Jesus is called our Passover Lamb in 1 Corinthians 5:7. And in 1 Corinthians 10, it talks about the baptism of Moses, where they passed through the Red Sea. There was clouds above and water around them. It talks about the baptism of Moses, and we too are saved through baptism. And so he talks about that. There are going to be many things that are used through this Exodus wanderings that will later be used to describe Christ. There's the coming of the water, the miraculous flow of water, and there's the giving of the manna as they go through the wilderness. And so these are going to be seen in Jesus later on. In fact, there's many things that are going to be seen that remind us of Jesus. In fact, in chapter 6, verse 6, it says here, my Bible's trying to stick. Chapter 6, verse 6. There we go. Say therefore to the sons of Israel, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will deliver you from their bondage. I will also redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgments. The redemption of God. The first time the word redemption is used in the Bible. God is going to redeem us. And of course, through Christ, that's exactly what he does. He's a redeemer. And then when you come to the second part of the book, and in chapter 19, Moses goes up to Mount Sinai to receive the law. And in chapter 19, verses 5 and 6, he says, "Now then, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be my own possession among all the peoples, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which you shall speak to the sons of Israel." Of course, this is going to be later fulfilled in Christ. We become a kingdom. We are priest. Every Christian, every child of God is a priest. We're all ministers to God. And so this is the first half of Exodus, this narrative about the story of Moses and going to Egypt and helping God as he redeems the people of Israel, and as they go and flee Egypt, as they exit Egypt, the exodus, the exit from Egypt, the departure, the leaving of Egypt. And then comes the law. Moses goes to Mount Sinai and receives the law, and beginning in chapter 20, you have the law. And in chapter 20 of Exodus, you have the Ten Commandments. Now, the Ten Commandments are going to be found in two places in the Old Testament. Exodus, the 20th chapter, and then again in Deuteronomy, the 5th chapter. So if you're thinking, where in the world do I find the Ten Commandments? Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy 5. And the Ten Commandments are kind of a preview to the rest of the laws. Laws are going to be dealing with how we are to treat God. The first four of the Ten Commandments are about our relationship with God. And then the last 6 commandments are about our relationship to one another, how we treat one another. And then as you go through the rest of the law of Moses, you find these laws relating to how we treat God and how we treat one another. And so now we're going to have what is called the law of Moses given to us. There's another way you can divide the Bible, by the way. You can divide it into the patriarchal age. That's the book of Genesis, where God speaks directly to the heads of the families, the patriarchs. And then we have the Mosaic age, where God speaks to the people through Moses. And now we're living in the Christian age, where God speaks through us through his Son, Jesus Christ. And so we read in Exodus all types of things that will be a shadow of the reality of what we have in Christ. The book of Hebrews refers to many things found in Exodus and says that we have the reality of these things found in Christ. And so we'll read about the tabernacle, and we'll read about different aspects of Old Testament worship that's going to be reflected in the New Testament. We're introduced to Aaron here. We learn about Moses and Aaron and Jethro. These are some of the main characters. So that is the book of Exodus, basically. That is it in a nutshell. So if I had to describe Exodus in just one word, I would use the word exit. Exodus almost sounds like exit, the departure from Egypt. And I hope that helps you remember that, this is a story about Moses. This is about how Moses is born and lives in the palace of the Pharaoh, and how he has killed a slave master when he's 40 years old. He flees to the wilderness, lives 40 years in the wilderness, gets married out in the wilderness, and God calls him from the wilderness to come back to Egypt to help him redeem God's people. And he's 80 years old when God redeems him, and we see the story develop in Exodus. And then you get to chapter 19, and Moses goes up to Mount Sinai, and then chapter 20 and following, you have the law of Moses. Well, I hope that's a good memory tool for you. Remember, Genesis in one word, beginnings are 4x4. Exodus is about the exit. Well, I'm glad you were able to join me today. That was a quick overview of Exodus, and I hope that it helps you to know what the entire book is about. Well, have a wonderful week, and may God bless you all.